back in September, a cute looking game called the Plucky Squire released, and I have to say, it looked kinda cool. The game has this cool mixture of 2D and 3D gameplay going on, and the art style was oddly nostalgic, so I decided to check it out. But I was hugely let down. How much of that is an objective fault of the game is up for debate, as it became increasingly clear as I got further through the game that I wasn't the target demographic for this. With all of that said, let's start off positive by discussing the creative premise. In the Plucky Squire, you're introduced to a classic storybook tale of Jot, a plucky young hero on an adventure to save his world. At the start, everything takes place inside the pages of a traditional 2D book. You see Jot navigating vibrant, hand-drawn environments, battling foes, solving puzzles, and helping the various characters in the book. It's the kind of experience that feels nostalgic, like you're playing an interactive fairy tale with simple side-scrolling mechanics. I was down for it. The world within the book is whimsical, full of lively illustrations, colourful characters, and dialogue that's written directly into the background like a story being narrated to you. But it quickly becomes clear that this is more than just a straightforward 2D platformer. At a critical moment, Jot finds that he can literally step out of the book and into the 3D world surrounding it. Suddenly, the perspective shifts, and you're controlling Jot in a fully three-dimensional space. The setting transforms from the flat pages of a book to the real-world environment of a child's bedroom, where the book is laid open on a desk. You're now looking at Jot as a miniature figure in a vast physical world, where everyday objects become massive in scale. The contrast between the two dimensions is pretty damn striking. In 2D, the gameplay focuses more on traditional elements, with a tight field of movement, straightforward combat, and puzzles that make use of the page's limited space. You might have to move objects or interact with people in specific ways to reveal the path forward. The storybook world has a fixed perspective and feels like an enclosed, self-contained environment. When you leap into 3D, everything opens up. The change is immediate and significant. You now have full freedom of movement now, and you can explore the larger room, climbing on books and jumping between objects, interacting with things in a new way. The world itself becomes part of the gameplay. The shift between dimensions is more than just a visual effect, it radically changes how you approach the game. You're constantly required to switch between the 2D and 3D perspectives, sometimes in clever and unexpected ways. Sometimes you'll need to solve a puzzle in the 3D world to progress in the 2D world, or vice versa. For example, imagine if you've encountered a locked door in the 2D world. To unlock it, you might need to go into the 3D world and interact with something that alters the environment of the book, and then jump back in to continue. The two gameplay styles do complement each other decently well, and this constant interplay between dimensions, it keeps the game flowing, and that is definitely something that this game needs. The creativity in mixing these two perspectives isn't just a gimmick, but it is the experience. You're not just playing in 2D or 3D, you're constantly using both to solve puzzles and progress the story. Whilst the transitions between the two dimensions are creative and exciting, the game often doesn't leave you much room for independent discovery or experimentation. From a design standpoint, this over-reliance on hand-holding affects the overall flow by limiting your sense of agency and challenge. When a game introduces unique mechanics like the dimensional shifts between 2D and 3D in the Plucky Squire, you would usually enjoy figuring out how these mechanics interact with the game world. However, if the game constantly guides you through each puzzle or step in the process, it diminishes the excitement of discovery. In the Plucky Squire, that is exactly what happens. The game tends to offer very clear and direct hints about what needs to be done. For example, when transitioning from 2D to 3D, the camera will immediately show you exactly where you need to go and what you need to interact with next. This hand-holding, while it does ensure you don't get stuck, prevents you from feeling like you've truly solved any of these puzzles on your own. I'll compare this to a game I played last year called Cocoon, where the whole gimmick of the game was jumping between worlds. The game, at least from my memory, doesn't have a single tutorial in it, but it subtly shows you instead of telling you. Cocoon isn't a difficult game, but it flows so much better because you're not constantly being thrown tutorials. This hand-holding impacts the pacing dramatically. The transitions between 2D and 3D could feel more rewarding if the game allowed for more moments where you have to stop, think, and experiment. Instead, the game's guidance keeps the flow too predictable. For anybody who enjoys puzzle solving or exploration, this will reduce the sense of satisfaction you get from mastering the game's mechanics. There's rarely a moment where you're forced to really use your brain to figure things out without the game giving you a nudge, which makes the gameplay feel very linear, even though it's set in a creative world that should invite more experimentation. Moreover, this approach can sometimes clash with the game's whimsical and adventurous tone. A key aspect of the appeal is the wonder of stepping out of the 2D world into a larger 3D space, but if you're always being told exactly what to do and where to go, that sense of discovery is dampened. You don't get the full feeling of exploring this vibrant 3D world on your own terms. That said, for younger or less experienced players, this level of guidance could be helpful, ensuring that the game remains accessible and doesn't frustrate them with unclear objectives. In a game as visually dynamic as the Plucky Squire, constantly being shown the next step could help avoid confusion, especially if you're juggling between dimensions and you get a bit lost. For those who prefer a more guided experience, this approach might even enhance the game's charm by keeping the adventure moving smoothly by preventing moments where you'd be lost. But with that being said, I do feel like I need to point out that the game already has two modes, adventure mode and story mode. Surely the adventure mode shouldn't be bogged down by useless tutorials. They could have kept most of that stuff in the story mode. I am not joking when I say you will still be getting tutorials way over halfway into the game. It's excessive. And this is where I need to acknowledge the target demographic. I believe it is very clearly targeted at younger gamers who don't have the experience I do, so it's difficult to bog the game down too much for this. Conversely, I've played plenty of kids games that weren't as on rails as this. The games I grew up on didn't care much for handholding, but I recognise that might be the most boomer thing I've ever said. While the dimensional shifts and playful mechanics are engaging, the lack of freedom to figure out your next move detracts from the game's overall potential. If the game allowed for more exploration and problem solving without the constant tips and hints, the interplay between 2D and 3D could feel far more immersive and rewarding. But what annoys me the most about this game is just the missed potential. On paper, this concept opens the door to all sorts of innovative puzzles, mechanics and level design where you could seamlessly weave between dimensions and solve complex challenges. However, while the game presents a novel idea, it doesn't really capitalise on the potential that this premise offers, and this can make certain parts of the experience feel underwhelming or even wasted. The most significant area where the game falls short is how the 2D and 3D worlds actually interact. The transitions between the two dimensions are visually striking and feel very fresh at first, but they rarely lead to truly inventive puzzles. You often find yourself solving fairly straightforward tasks in either dimension separately, without much need to use them together in meaningful complex ways. The majority of puzzles rely on you completing a simple action in one dimension, then moving to the next and continuing the task, rather than integrating both dimensions simultaneously to create intricate layered challenges. Now, I'm not saying that this never happens. There definitely are times where you are in the 2D world and you must go back into the 3D world and then back into the 2D world, but most of the time these sections are segmented. Many puzzles or objectives in the game involve you completing one set of actions in the 2D space and then stepping into the 3D world to do one thing and then just come back. The concept of being able to shift between 2D and 3D could have allowed for more inventive puzzle design. Again, I must compare this to Cocoon. The concept is so similar, but just executed much better in that game. If you liked what the Plucky Squire was trying to do, then I highly recommend Cocoon. The puzzle design, while charming, also tends to be too simple and lack the depth that could have made the game more engaging. Most puzzles are solved in a single step. Do something in 2D, finish it in 3D, and then that's it. The game rarely challenges you to think outside the box, or outside the book, I guess you could say. Nope, we're not going to say that, right, moving on. In a game built around two entirely different perspectives though, this is a missed opportunity. The 3D world itself initially feels like a playground full of potential, but it ends up feeling underused. The real world environments, it's a child's room. There are toys, everyday objects, they're brimming with possibilities for creative platforming, but they often just feel like static, oversized backdrops, instead of fully exploring how you could interact with these objects in imaginative ways. The game often reduces the 3D world into simple navigational spaces. You might jump across a few toys or climb a stack of books, but these actions don't feel particularly inventive or integral to the experience. It's just another block to climb up. It could literally just be a grey cylinder and the gameplay wouldn't change at all. The world feels more like a series of obstacles rather than an interactive environment rich with discovery. But if you wanted to know what annoyed me the most about this game, I was denied the Platinum Trophy because of a bug. When I collected my 9th glitch bird, the game said something like, "You found your 3rd glitch bird," and I was like, what? No, I didn't. And then the trophy tracker, I realised, was stuck at 60%. Annoying as hell. But trophy troubles aside, the Plucky Squire was a game I really wanted to like, but it ultimately just hamstrung itself in the quest to be as accessible as possible. If this was your first ever video game, then I think it's fine. Hell, it's probably a really good first video game. But if you've played 5 games before, then surely the constant handholding here seems excessive. I'm not even good at puzzle games, and I did not struggle. It also just presents a creative premise, then decides that's enough, job done, clock out, instead of putting in the effort to make that premise special. And the game ultimately will be remembered, by me at least, as a game that should have been much better than it was. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, then click the like button because you liked it, so you should like the video. If you want to see more videos from me, then you should click the subscribe button because that means you will be able to see more videos from me, and I upload them every single week. But for now, that is all. Have a nice day and goodbye.